Wisconsin might look like a state defined by dairy farms, frozen lakes, and football, but it's hiding some of the most extraordinary facts you've never heard. Like a river that travels 126 miles to cover a straight line distance of just 60. A prehistoric lake that drained completely in less than a week, carving one of the most famous tourist destinations in the Midwest in the process. Or a hill made of rock so old it was already ancient before the first animal crawled onto dry land. So you thought you knew everything there was to know about this state? You're wrong. In this video, we covered 25 crazy facts about Wisconsin that are absolutely incredible. Let's get started. Fact 25. The continent that almost split. The bedrock beneath Lake Superior is the scar of a near catastrophe. About 1.1 billion years ago, the North American continent began tearing itself apart along a crack called the Mid-Continent Rift System, a 1,860-mile fracture that poured out more volcanic rock than almost any event in the continent's history. The rift failed before it could open a new ocean. The basin it left behind eventually filled with glacial meltwater and became Lake Superior. Wisconsin's northern shoreline sits directly on the edge of that failed rupture. The lake that defines the state's northern border exists because a continental breakup stopped just short of completion. Fact 24. Lake Winnebago, remnant of a much bigger ancient lake. Lake Winnebago is Wisconsin's largest inland lake, and it is unusually shallow for its size. It is a remnant of a much larger proglacial body of water called Glacial Lake Oshkosh, which pooled in the basin carved by the Green Bay lobe of the Laurentide ice sheet. When the ice retreated and the meltwater drained, Lake Winnebago was what remained. The shallow leftover of a far larger ancient sea. Its size and shallowness give it unique thermal properties, contributing to localized weather patterns and making it a key driver of the Fox River and Green Bay ecology. Wisconsin's biggest inland lake is also one of the smallest pieces of what used to be there. Fact 23. The waterfall almost nobody knows about. Big Manitou. Falls in Pattison State Park is the tallest waterfall in Wisconsin, dropping 165 feet into a rugged gorge carved through dark volcanic basalt over 1 billion years old. The Black River plunges over a stark volcanic ledge with enough force to carve a deep basin ringed by rock walls, rising nearly 200 feet. The mist creates a moist microenvironment where rare mosses and ferns thrive on the damp cliff faces, isolated from the drier surrounding forests. Most national rankings of American waterfalls leave it out. Most postcards skip it entirely. It is one of the most overlooked tall waterfalls in the country. Fact 22. Rock that survived 1 billion years. The Baraboo Range in Sauk County is an elliptical ridge of pink and purple quartzite, approximately 1.6 billion years old, one of the most ancient exposed rock surfaces in North America. It was once buried miles underground during the mountain building events of the Pennocean orogeny, then slowly exhumed by erosion over hundreds of millions of years. Ancient beach ripples are preserved in the stone, patterns identical to those left by waves on a modern shoreline, frozen in rock, harder than steel. The Baraboo Hills are not just old, they are a physical record of a shoreline that existed before complex life appeared on Earth. Fact 21. The lake that drained in days. About 14,000 years ago, a glacial lake called Glacial Lake Wisconsin covered at least 1,825 square miles of the central part of the state, 8 times the size of modern Lake Winnebago, up to 160 feet deep. It existed because the Green Bay lobe of the Laurentide ice sheet had dammed the Wisconsin River against the Baraboo Hills. When the ice dam failed, the lake drained catastrophically. Peak discharge reached over 100,000 cubic meters of water per second. The river swelled to more than 100 times its normal size. The entire lake emptied in approximately 3 days. The sandstone gorges of Wisconsin Dells, one of the most visited destinations in the state, were carved by that single event. Fact 20. The spot at the crossroads of the world. In Marathon County, near the city of Wausau, Wisconsin contains a precise geographic marker that has no equivalent almost anywhere else. It is the intersection of the 45th parallel north and the 90th meridian west. This is the point that sits halfway between the equator and the North Pole, and halfway between the prime meridian and the international date line. Stand on it, and you are mathematically at the midpoint of two of the most important reference lines on Earth. The actual marker on the ground is modest. The geometry behind it is not. Fact 19, the deepest holes drilled by water. At Interstate State Park on the St. Croix River, glacial meltwater moving at catastrophic speed through a narrow basalt gorge created over 80 cylindrical potholes drilled directly into 1.1 billion-year-old volcanic rock. The process worked like a drill press. Water trapped stones and gravel in circular eddies, spinning them continuously against the bedrock until they bored straight down. The deepest confirmed pothole, known as the bottomless pit, descends 60 feet into solid basalt and is 10 feet wide. It was not carved over millennia. It was drilled by a single sustained episode of glacial flooding. The park sits on the floor of what was once a raging torrent. Fact 18, the marsh that holds 250,000 birds. Horicon Marsh in Dodge County is the largest freshwater cattail marsh in the United States. 32,000 acres of wetland, sitting in the bed of a glacial lake that vanished 12,000 years ago. Every autumn, up to 250,000 Canada geese descend on it during their southward migration, along with over 100,000 ducks and millions of additional waterfowl. The marsh is a Ramsar wetland of international importance. It is also a designated key biodiversity area. It sits in the middle of one of the most intensively farmed regions of the Midwest, a 32,000-acre ecological island that the glaciers left behind and the birds never forgot. Fact 17, the river that goes nowhere. Fast, the Kickapoo River in southwestern Wisconsin travels 126 miles from its headwaters to its mouth on the Wisconsin River. The straight line distance between those 2 points is 60 miles. The river covers that distance by looping, doubling back, and reversing direction so many times that it has earned the informal title of the crookedest river in the world. The name Kickapoo comes from an Algonquian word meaning one who goes here, then there, a description that fits the river more precisely than it ever fit the people it was named after. The driftless area gave the river millions of years to meander through ancient limestone valleys with no glacier ever coming to straighten it out. Fact 16, the divide that splits the rain. Running through the northern highlands of Wisconsin is the Laurentian Divide, an invisible line of glacial debris and ancient granite that separates two of the world's great drainage basins. Water falling north of this line flows toward Hudson Bay and the Arctic Ocean. Water falling south of it flows toward the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence River, and the Atlantic. In certain locations near Hurley, two raindrops landing inches apart will travel to different oceans. The divide was shaped by the same glacial forces that built the rest of northern Wisconsin's topography. It has no dramatic cliffs or visible markers. It is a ridge of gravel that decides where water goes for the rest of its existence. Fact 15, the escarpment that connects to Niagara. The Niagara Escarpment enters Wisconsin from Lake Michigan and runs the length of the Door County Peninsula, a 230-mile cliff of Silurian dolomite formed from the compressed shells of marine organisms that lived 420 million years ago in a warm tropical sea. The same geological formation continues east through Michigan, Ontario, and New York, where it creates Niagara Falls. In Door County, the escarpment rises directly from the water as a jagged limestone wall supporting ancient northern white cedar trees up to 1,800 years old. Some of the oldest living organisms in the Midwest. The cliff that defines the Door Peninsula and the cliff that creates one of the world's most famous waterfalls are the same rock. Fact 14, the trail that traces a glacier's edge. The Ice Age National Scenic Trail runs nearly 1,200 miles across Wisconsin. one of only 11 national scenic trails in the United States, and one of only 3 contained entirely within a single state. It follows the terminal moraine of the last continental glacier, tracing the precise line where the Laurentide ice sheet stopped advancing roughly 10,000 to 15,000 years ago. Every feature along the trail, the kettles, the kames, the eskers, the drumlins, the erratics, is a direct product of that ice. The trail does not pass through glacial landscape. It is drawn on it, following the edge of an ice sheet that no longer exists across the exact ground where it stopped. Hey, before we carry on, if you're finding these wild facts about Wisconsin entertaining, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. It keeps the content rolling. The second half of this list gets stranger. You don't want to miss it. Fact 13, the hills that reveal the ice's direction. Dodge County contains over 5,000 drumlins, the highest concentration of these glacial landforms anywhere on Earth. A drumlin is a teardrop-shaped hill formed when a glacier molds accumulated debris into a streamlined form beneath its own weight. The blunt end points toward the direction the ice came from. The tapered end points the way it was moving. Viewed from the air, the drumlins of Dodge County look like a school of fish frozen mid-swim, all oriented in the same direction, recording the movement of an ice sheet that vanished 10,000 years ago. Wisconsin's Capitol building in Madison sits on one. The state's political center is built on a hill shaped by a glacier. Fact 12. The sea caves that only open in winter. The Apostle Islands along Wisconsin's Lake Superior shoreline contain a network of sea caves carved into Precambrian sandstone by centuries of wave action, freeze-thaw cycles, and ice abrasion. In summer, they are accessible only by kayak or boat. In rare winters, when Lake Superior freezes sufficiently, which happens only a handful of times per decade, the caves become accessible on foot across the ice. In 2014, the ice was stable enough for the first time in years, and over 138,000 people walked out to the caves in a single season. The caves themselves are always there. The ability to reach them depends entirely on a lake that is becoming less predictable every year. Fact 11, the gorge that stays cold all year. Parfrey's Glen, Wisconsin's first designated state natural area, is a narrow gorge cut up to 100 feet deep into Cambrian sandstone on the south flank of the Baraboo Hills. The walls are embedded with rounded quartzite pebbles and boulders, conglomerate rock deposited on an ancient beach roughly 500 million years ago. The gorge is so deep and narrow that sunlight reaches the bottom for only a brief window each day, keeping the interior significantly cooler than the surrounding landscape year-round. That cold microclimate allows northern plant species, mosses, ferns, and mountain maple to survive here, far south of their normal range. The canyon is a cold trap. The plants inside it have nowhere else to go. Fact 10, the lake that holds 10% of the world's surface freshwater. Lake Superior borders Wisconsin's entire northern edge for roughly 250 miles. It is the largest lake in the world by surface area, 31,700 square miles, and holds approximately 10% of all the surface freshwater on Earth. Its maximum depth is 1,333 feet. Below 660 feet, the temperature is a constant 39 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, regardless of season. The lake is cold enough and deep enough that it does not fully turn over its water column the way smaller lakes do. Ships that sink in Lake Superior tend to stay where they fall, preserved by the cold. The lake does not give up what it takes. Fact 9, the volcanic gorge on the Minnesota border. The Dalles of the St. Croix at Interstate State Park is a narrow canyon cut through basalt that erupted from the mid-continent rift 1.1 billion years ago. The canyon walls rise nearly 200 feet above the river, exposing dark volcanic columns that formed as lava cooled and contracted into geometric shapes. The St. Croix River did not carve this canyon gradually. It was cut rapidly by the same catastrophic glacial meltwater that drilled the potholes into the canyon floor. The basalt it cut through is among the oldest exposed volcanic rock in the Midwest. The gorge is a cross-section through 1 billion years of geological time, visible from a hiking trail. Fact 8, the dunes that buried a civilization. Whitefish Dunes. State Park protects the tallest Great Lakes dunes on Wisconsin's Lake Michigan shore. These sand hills formed over thousands of years as waves and wind carried fine particles from the lakebed and deposited them along the Door County coast. Some dunes reach nearly 100 feet high, offering views over turquoise waters that look more like the Caribbean than the Midwest. Buried beneath the sand, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of native settlements over 2,000 years old, preserved by the steady accumulation of dunes that slowly covered them. The dunes did not just shape a coastline, they sealed a chapter of human history beneath their own movement. Fact 7, the Driftless Caves. The Driftless area of southwestern Wisconsin contains an extensive network of karst caves formed by slightly acidic groundwater dissolving the ancient dolomite bedrock over millions of years. Cave of the Mounds in Blue Mounds was discovered in 1939 when a quarry blast broke through its ceiling, revealing a cave system that had been sealed from the surface for an unknown period. The temperature inside holds at a constant 50 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. The formations inside grow at approximately 1 inch every 100 years. The cave exists because the glaciers never came to fill the driftless area with debris and seal the drainage pathways that allowed the dissolution to continue. Fact 6, the drumlin the capital sits on. Madison, Wisconsin, is built on an isthmus between two glacial lakes, Mendota and Monona, both formed by the same ice sheet that shaped the surrounding landscape. The Wisconsin State Capitol building sits on a drumlin, a glacially formed hill that the Laurentide ice sheet molded from debris as it advanced across the region. The four lakes surrounding Madison, Mendota, Monona, Wabasca, and Kagansa, are all glacial in origin, connected by the Yahara River in a chain that follows the path of the retreating ice. The capital of Wisconsin was built on a glacial landform between glacial lakes in a landscape assembled entirely by ice. Fact 5, the divide between two worlds. The tension zone, a biological boundary identified by geobotanists, cuts diagonally across Wisconsin from northwest to southeast, separating two entirely distinct ecological worlds. South of the line, the landscape is dominated by species adapted to warmer, drier conditions, oak savannas, prairies, and deciduous forest. North of it, the vegetation shifts to the cooler, moister environment of the boreal forest, pine, spruce, and northern hardwoods. The line is not a wall, it is a gradient, a zone of overlap where species from both regions coexist and compete. Scientists have documented that this boundary has been shifting northward over the past century. Wisconsin's ecological geography is not fixed, it is moving. Fact 4, the river that built the state. The Wisconsin River runs 430 miles from its headwaters in Vilas County to its confluence with the Mississippi at Wyalusing, the longest river entirely within the state. It crosses the Laurentian Divide, drains the Central Sands region, carved the gorges of Wisconsin Dells, and was the primary transportation corridor for the fur trade, the timber industry, and early European settlement. The river also created the Central Sands, a vast flat plain of glacial outwash that is now one of the most productive agricultural regions in the state, growing the majority of Wisconsin's potato and cranberry crops. The river did not just flow through Wisconsin's history, it shaped the physical and economic geography of the entire state. Fact 3, the mines that predated history. In far northern Wisconsin, native copper sits in pure metallic form within ancient basalt bedrock. The deposits are exposed enough at the surface that indigenous peoples discovered them at least 6,000 years ago. By 4000 BC, an organized mining culture was extracting copper from pits across the Lake Superior lowland, hammering it into tools and trade goods that spread across the entire North American continent. This is the oldest known metalwork on the continent by thousands of years. Long before Europeans arrived, Wisconsin sat at the center of a continental trade network powered by stone hammers, fire, and one of the only places on Earth where copper occurs naturally as ready-to-use metal. Fact 2, the mountain surrounded by a river. Trempealeau Mountain in Perrot State Park is one of only 3 rock islands in North America. entirely surrounded by the waters of the Mississippi River. The peak rises roughly 500 feet above the water, composed of limestone and sandstone that was once part of the mainland bluffs along the river's eastern shore. Over thousands of years, the Mississippi slowly carved a new channel behind the peak, eventually isolating it completely. The French name for it translates roughly to the mountain that soaks in the water. For many indigenous nations, it was a sacred site and a strategic lookout over the broad river valley. A mountain entirely encircled by river water is not something most American geography textbooks include. Wisconsin has one of the very few that exist on the continent. Fact 1. The state of two eras. Wisconsin is two landscapes pretending to be one state. The eastern two-thirds is a young glaciated terrain. Drumlins, kettle lakes, moraines, and outwash plains left behind by ice that retreated only 15,000 years ago. The southwestern driftless area is something completely different. A deeply ancient pre-glacial landscape that the ice never touched, with topography millions of years older than anything around it. Cross a single line on the map and the rocks change, the rivers change, the soils change. The rolling farmlands give way to limestone canyons within a few miles. Wisconsin is not one place, it is two, and the line where they meet is the most consequential boundary in the state. Wisconsin may not always demand the spotlight, but once you start digging into its stories, it's hard not to see it as one of America's most unexpectedly fascinating states. Subscribe if you want more videos like this, and drop a comment telling us which fact surprised you most. We promise to read every single one.